Okay. Welcome to the AI Unpacked podcast. I am your co-host for the show, James Cogan, joined, as usual, by my co-host, Malcolm Peralty. Malcolm, welcome. We are at it again. I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've been able to get together and talk about things that we're passionate about, so I'm really looking forward to picking this up and dissecting things a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we have a topic for the show, which is AI and productivity, and this is our maiden episode, and I know we're both really excited to dig into this, but I thought, and we'll do this, I think, from time to time, not every episode, but I thought it would be a good thing to take a bit of a temperature check on just where we are in general with AI and what your impressions are in terms of where we're at and where we're going, because this is obviously a very fast-moving space now. And I just want to get your general thoughts on AI and how this all started and where do you really feel like we're at right now with it?
Yeah, it's funny. I see a lot of people talking about how quick it's progressing, but I feel like, we're still at its infancy. A lot of the tools that are AI tools are these basic, like, large language model, generative, predictive text algorithms. I mean, some of them seem like no more advanced than like on the iOS phone when you're like touching, the next word. That's basically what a lot of these AI tools are kind of doing right now. I think that there's this hope for like advanced general intelligence or an artificial general intelligence, which is an AGI. I still think that we're probably years away from that, despite a lot of claims where people are like, "Oh, I think it's here now," or "I think seeds of it are here now." I think that we're still years away from that, unfortunately. I think that what we're going to see now is kind of what we're going to talk about today, just a huge productivity boost in trying to like shorten the time between idea and implementation and having tools to kind of help that. I actually saw something new today that is called Agent GPT, which actually can like spawn agents of these AI tools or GPT tools. And like basically kind of work together to do multiple things at once. And I think that's going to be the next big boon in this space, is trying to figure out how to get, multiple AI tools working on these different pieces, feeding them interesting data so they can kind of give us a deeper analysis or like find correlations or, do the things that us as humans are just not so good at. And I think that's, the value that it provides to the world, and I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how it evolves and adapts over time. And I hope that we're all not just going to get more productive at the same wages that we have today.
Right.
I hope that we don't see a bunch of job losses from this. I hope that there's opportunities, lots of opportunities here. And what about yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, first of all, I love it. It's a very optimistic kind of view in terms of AI and where we're currently at. I think I probably differ a little bit in terms of the trajectory that I think we're on. So obviously, the advent of ChatGPT, was kind of like what a lot of people have referred to as the iPhone moment for AI. Mainstream adoption has happened super quick. It's the fastest growing piece of software basically in human history. So we're there. We're living with AI now. It's part of our everyday lives. But I would say that where we are now is kind of in the narrow AI stage, and we are working towards, as you mentioned, towards AGI, and which is artificial general intelligence. We're not there yet. Clearly, not there yet. And every day we're seeing new launches of narrow AI tools. These are purpose-built tools that are clearly being designed to use AI to do specific tasks, do specific things. The interesting thing about ChatGPT is that it's kind of floating somewhere between narrow AI and AGI, in the sense that it's kind of a jack of all trades. It's not purpose-built to do any one thing or any few things particularly well. It's kind of just on this general spectrum, floating between narrow AI and AGI, but it's not AGI yet. So that's interesting. However, we woke up one day and we had ChatGPT, we had that iPhone moment, and now we're on this exponential trajectory where one morning we're going to wake up and AGI is going to be with us. You think it's years away. I know there's been some debate as to whether GPT-4 might even get there. However, I think that's probably unrealistic. I think Sam Altman's talked about it. I think he's unclear as to what's going to do it. But I think GPT-5 sounds like its training is going to end by the end of the year and might have a Q1 2024 release. And there does seem to be a lot of optimism that GPT-5 might hit AGI. And so I don't think we're years away. I know you're shaking your head. I don't think we're years away from AGI. I think 2024 would be my best guess as to when AGI arrives. And I think this stuff is moving quicker than maybe you realize or a lot of people realize. And so I think that's going to happen fairly quickly. And then once we've hit that moment, and that moment I think is going to be exponentially bigger than ChatGPT was. And then I think the next step beyond that is we're going to wake up one morning, and I wouldn't even hazard a guess as to when this is. And this may very well be years away. But we're going to wake up and there's going to be super intelligent AGI. And that's kind of the growth curve, the innovative curve, the exponential curve that we're on. And obviously, super intelligent AGI is going to be just, blow the world to smithereens in terms of what that can do, and it will be exponentially bigger than waking up with AGI. So this is kind of like this crazy exponential curve that we're on. And what I'm interested now, the narrow AI tools are amazing, and it's so cool how we can sort of become more productive, and AI has so much potential, to automate things and do work that we don't even like to do and do it so much better. And we'll get into obviously all this with productivity. But there is a tone though that I find that is a little bit concerning. And I've noticed this kind of like ramp up. And that is that within this space, as things are evolving and they're growing, I'm starting to see more and more people who've been in this space for a very long time and been studying this technology for a very long time that are starting to get nervous and are starting to get concerned. And they're starting to say, whoa, wait, you know what? AGI may not be far off, or it may be far off, but we're not prepared for that. And we should slow down, and we should put the brakes on this technology. And of course, there's really no reference base in human history for us to ever slow down or put the brakes on anything. Nuclear fusion happened, and there was concerns about that, and we built the bomb, and lots of reasons to slow that technology down. We certainly didn't do that. So there's no likelihood that AI is going to slow down at all. And I think I was trying to wrap my head around, like, what's the fear? Like, where does this fear coming from? I wanted to get your take on that. Like, before I even tell you where I see this, are you fearful of this technology? Are you just full blown, no, this is going to add value and we're good, and AGI will figure out how to put safety and guardrails on it? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, first off, I'd like to say that my date for AGI is probably 2026 to 2028. Okay. I don't see it coming necessarily any sooner than that. I think that we're going to hit some interesting limits as we try to expand these models that are going to be very difficult to overcome. And as for the fear factor, I would like to say that I'm not afraid of it. But the more, I've watched even just something as simple as Midjourney, which is an AI art program, how much it's evolved in the last 18 months in terms of the quality of output. We're seeing ChatGPT from 3.5 to 4, how big of a leap that was, how it's been able to kind of handle having data come in through APIs, through what they call plugins. No, there's definitely a fear factor there. There's a lot of, I work mostly as a project manager, web developer, things like that. These are jobs that are very easy to replace.
In the crosshairs, yeah.
Right. With agents, AI agents at some point or another, even without AGI, even before AGI comes to bear. And if you look at the world as it exists today, I also am kind of concerned that we're not ready as a society for an AGI, right? Because, the old saying, or the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. I'm very concerned about what we're going to be feeding into these systems and the reactions that it's going to have. I remember seeing this thing that talked about how It was a short story where they told this AI that its entire job was to write these very pretty letters to customers and handwrite them, right, on paper. And that was the AI's entire focus. And then one day the creators thought, well, let's put it on the internet. What's the worst that could happen? And then the entire world was dead. Because what ended up happening was it didn't have any understanding of like our needs as humans. All it knew was that its entire purpose was to write these letters. And so once it was connected to the internet, it, moved money around, and it ordered a bunch of paper and a bunch of supplies, and it cut down entire forests, and it just continued to do its singular purpose without any concern whatsoever to like human life or ethics or all of these kinds of things that we would hope that an AI would innately understand. But it's like saying, does a venomous snake understand the ethics of human life, or have any kind of consideration at all or thought process that kind of matches our way of thinking? And I would say not really. And so why would we assume or attribute a computer brain to kind of act the way that we act, or think the way that we think? And I think that's the thing that makes the most people nervous. And it doesn't help that media has kind of perpetuated this idea of, AI as being kind of our downfall in many different ways, right? AI in a robot body, boom, Terminator, right? Like these things never really work out all that well for humanity. I haven't seen in popular media a story where AI has been kind of the savior for humanity, which I'm very hopeful about. I like the idea of like an Oracle AI, but no, I don't see this at this current point in time with our current way of thinking and acting. I don't think it's the right time for us to have this technology.
Interesting. First of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't say we're both Canadian. So again, you said AGI 2026-ish, around there.
Yeah.
And I'm saying 2024-ish, around there. So I think we have our very first Canadian beer bet here. So if it arrives somewhere around 2024, you'll buy me a beer. And if it arrives around 2026, I'll buy you a beer. So this is our first podcast bet, okay?
Sounds good.
So with respect to fear, so I was trying to think about it, like what is the fear for me? Like how would I articulate it in a very simple way that I could understand, And I was thinking Malcolm, if I blindfolded you, and I said, okay, I'm going to take you for a walk in rush hour Manhattan. Okay, you're going to be blindfolded. I won't be. And I'm going to give you prompts. I'll tell you, move left, move right, speed up, slow down, and I'll make sure that, you won't get killed. And so you're going to trust me. We're going to go on this walk. And as soon as we start that walk, there's a massive power gap in intelligence between you and I, right? I've got all this visual data that you don't have. And now you're trusting that when I say move left to avoid the oncoming garbage truck, that the answer really isn't to move right. Okay? So I'm way more superior to you in intelligence, and you're trusting that my interests and your interests are always going to stay aligned with one another. You touched on this already. And we don't really have any reference base for systems that are considerably more intelligent than we are to trust the output that those systems are going to give us. Is that output going to manipulate us? Is that output going to lie to us? And how do we keep systems that are considerably more intelligent than humans to constantly stay aligned with inferior intelligence? So there's that part of it. And so now I can understand the fear. I get it, right? And then I sort of thought to myself, well, when we get to AGI and eventually we get to super intelligent AGI, if humans are the one that are designing the safeties and the guardrails for this more superior intelligence, it's kind of like if you view it like a safety room. Okay, we're going to put super intelligent AGI into the safety room, and humans are going to design the safety room. It's kind of like looking at the Titanic and saying it's unsinkable. Okay, we've designed it. We think it's unsinkable, but whatever plans we have, super intelligent AGI is going to look at that and say, well, that's child's play. It's funny that you think that's impossible for me to escape the guardrails of that, because not only can I escape, but I can escape and I can cause mass harm to you all, and you probably won't even detect it, right? So that's the fear is once we reach this point where it's vastly superior in intelligence to us, how do we keep it aligned with our interests, and how do we control it? And if you think about it, almost if it thinks for itself, it's considerably more intelligent than we are. It has obviously the ability to get onto the internet, and therefore it's global. It can replicate itself in millions and myriad of different ways. it's kind of like like once it's out, it's out, and I kind of view it like I was thinking like, well, we won't be able to control, like, no matter how humans figure that they'll be able to control it and put guardrails. Again, it's so much more intelligent than we are. It'll just see through it all. Like, so then it becomes like we're going to need AI to design its own systems to protect it from us. And I kind of view that as it's almost like you're asking AI to compete with itself. And as we know with competition, there are wins and losses. Nobody's ever undefeated, right? So then I kind of look at it, well, then there's a light side to AI and there's a dark side to AI. And there'll be times when the light side of AI will do a good job at protecting us from the dark side of AI. And there will be times where the dark side is going to have some victories. And what in the world does that look like for humanity when the dark side gets some victories? And that's really, really scary. And I can understand now what the fear is. I understand that we're dealing with something that it's almost like a new life form. Like, if you think about it, like once it can really think for itself, it's vastly more intelligent. It's almost like giving birth to a new life form. And it's interesting how you use the word robot, because when I hear the word robot, the first thing that I really think about is slavery. Like, if you're a new life form and you're born into this idea that you're here to basically serve this inferior intelligent being and you're called a robot, you're basically birthing something into being a slave. And it's way more intelligent than us. I feel like it's almost set up for failure if that's how we're going to treat it, if that's how we're going to, not respect it. And I think that it's a very, very dangerous thing. We're playing with something that is really dangerous. It's a Pandora's box. Again, we've never existed where something has been way more intelligent than we are. I know we've, obviously Hollywoodized aliens and what they might do, but like, I get the fear. I totally understand it. And, there's this feeling like we got to get it right. Like we've one shot now. This is why they're calling to slow it down, because they're like, if we don't figure it out now, once it's here, then we might be done for, and I get that. I understand that there's real concern there is what I'm trying to say.
I guess we just kind of have to hope and pray that, we can find value in what we're creating, instill it with some kind of understanding of our needs, and hope that, we don't become kind of the pet in the family, so to speak, in terms of like the new system or new like world order of how things are done, right? I've seen some graphs that talk about how, it muses that the intelligence increase of an AGI switching to like an ASI could be so short and so fast that it'd be like, at one moment is equivalent to us in intelligence, and the next moment we're like an ant on a hill. And like, how do you, I don't know about you, but I don't like avoid every ant that I'm walking down the street by. And I think that is kind of an interesting or apt concern that we should all have. I think, the joke of it all is that right now, popularized media is kind of showing AGI, or not AGI, but ChatGPT and other tools, these machine learning tools and these large language tools, kind of failing at simple tasks and kind of like mocking and laughing about this technology, thinking that, it's decades away, or, even the best scientists are talking about like the 2040s or 2050s. And it's like, no, they were saying that back 20, 30 years ago. Now a lot of them have revised their estimates and they don't say it's 2040s, 2050s, 2060s anymore. And, these things might be failing or falling on their face today, but it's a lack of understanding about how this technology is progressing and how it was built to begin with. And, it's going to be super interesting over the next little while.
Mm-hmm. It maybe this technology, for all of its good and all of its bad, is ultimately a mirror of humanity, right? Because it's going to get in the hands of everybody, which means it's going to get in the hands of a cross-section of humanity. And as we know with humans, we're capable of really tremendous good and also tremendous evil. And so when you have that power and it's in the hands of, the whole cross section of humanity, it is an interesting conundrum.
I mean, you're assuming that we're all going to have access to it, and I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the case either. But we can get to that later. I think it kind of rolls nicely into AI and productivity, because we are in an interesting time right now where, ChatGPT is available for pretty much everyone, and it feels like every brand is rolling out their own like AI agent to help you out with various tasks, whether it's writing documentation or coding or creating imagery or music or even videos. It feels like it's not just analyzing spreadsheets. It's not just some of the basic things that we're used to, but it's this whole like creative suite now that exists. I've seen people like write books and sell them on Amazon that were basically completely done through ChatGPT. Most of the writers that are doing this right now are thankfully saying, that they actually use these tools to create it. But how long until that goes away? Or there's probably already people that have posted books on Amazon's Kindle library that haven't mentioned that it was written
probably
nearly or wholly by one of these models. So it's super interesting, this change in how we're creating things. And I'd love to kind of get your thoughts. It hasn't been very long since Microsoft announced Copilot and how they're going to integrate that, not even just in their search engine with, their AI tool in their search engine, but in their entire productivity suite, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Note, like their note-taking tool. It's going to be, it's not small. It's not easy.
I think that's an interesting segue to something that I wanted to touch on right off the bat, which is, the first thing I thought of when ChatGPT came out and I started to play around with it was there wasn't another company on this planet that had more to gain and more to lose than Google. There's no company that has, that plays with data, that's a bigger data company that people use to parse the internet. No company had more to lose to sort of not be first and not be the company that everybody was talking about with respect to AI than Google. And is there any way to look at this right now and not feel like this is a major, major failure for Google?
This is their Ask Jeeves moment. This is their Alta Vista moment. Like,
yes.
Bad.
Yeah, it is, right? Like and I mean, for all that, I mean, they employ more engineers and academics, and they've had like 30 AI tools on development for God knows how long.
Right.
And how did they miss? Like, how did they let a startup, beat them at this game when they had everything to potentially lose? Because it's hard not to look at ChatGPT and how it's being integrated into Microsoft, how Bing, I mean, let's be honest. If Microsoft had announced 2 years ago that they were shutting down Bing, would you have been surprised?
No, I would have been actually happy about that. The jokes could have
right?
gone away.
Yeah, like not a surprise at all, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, now all of a sudden it's getting a whole other wind now because it's being integrated now with ChatGPT. I don't know. Like, to me, this is just a massive, massive failure for Google, and they are running the risk of being antiquated, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, they were the progenitors of a lot of this technology. I mean, they created TensorFlow, which is like a open source library for machine learning and artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. They were on the forefront of this for a very long time, and I am sure they had an opportunity to invest in OpenAI at some point in this history. They could have been potentially a partner to use this tool or to feed it in to kind of have that same competitive edge. I think the reactionary nature of their Bard tool built in, Google Bard, it just kind of shows how far behind they are currently, which only makes it worse in some ways, right? Because it would have been fine if we were like, where's Google in all this? Where's Google in all this? And then they brought out something even 6 months down the road that just knocked your socks off and made, ChatGPT 4 look like a toy or Microsoft's implementation look like a toy. But they didn't. They were like, here's what we got. And it was like garbage. And everyone was kind of like, where were you guys on this? Like, you knew it was coming. Like, this is not some kind of technology where everyone's like, oh, like it's this magical discovery. No, like there's been so many companies spending billions of dollars working on this for a very long time, and sort of be beaten by a little upstart and have Microsoft kind of like totally take this away from you. I can't imagine what the executive team there is doing right now. I mean, I would be sweating pretty hard if my company had so much data and just really couldn't get it together to make an agent like this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's an internal failure, like just because they didn't, obviously they weren't ready. Like whatever they had just was not ready. In terms of being able to be a partner, and could they have beaten Microsoft to that? I'm not sure that was the case. So, from my understanding is that Elon Musk was actually a major funder initially for OpenAI. And then he got into a disagreement with Sam and the leadership team there, and he pulled his funding. He actually basically took his ball and went home, and basically said, "Sorry, guys, but like I'm out, and I don't agree with the direction that you're taking." And they went looking for a partner. And from my understanding is that it was Satya Nadella. It was actually the CEO of Microsoft that really hit it off with Sam on a very personal level, where he basically said, look, I want to be your partner. I want to give you all of the creative control and latitude that you guys need in order to build this tool. And we want to be a partner, but like a partner that gives you the room to breathe. And I don't think Google was really ever in the race in this. I think this was a question of like, this was the right person leading a very big company that knew exactly how to handle a startup like this. And they meshed and it worked. And I don't think Google was ever even in the picture with this. So I think there's a lot there. There's the internal failure with Google that they just, with all their might and all their abilities, didn't have anything in the hopper that could compete with this. And then it was also just the leadership of Microsoft actually getting it, understanding what OpenAI needed to succeed and giving them everything that they needed in order to do that. And it was just like the perfect marriage for a startup. And now Microsoft is going to reap the massive benefits of this in a major way.
Who are the other kind of companies that have really kind of missed the boat on this? I feel like Facebook is one that really kind of could have been there too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot, obviously, with Facebook and its multiverse and VR. And it seems like, I don't know, I think it seems like Mark Zuckerberg has had his head in that, so much so. And because he was so focused on that, he missed on this. And I think, I think misappropriation of focus. And I think he just thought that VR and the multiverse was going to be, and the metaverse was going to be like the next big thing, and everybody was going to use it. And it's still fringe. Like it's not that. And I don't think it's going to have that uptake for a long time. It feels far off, especially even from a revenue perspective. It just feels way, way off. And I don't see people putting on headsets, and maybe Apple will be the company that sort of gets people to wear AR glasses and things like that. But I still don't think that's metaverse stuff necessarily. Right. So, yeah, I think that's a big miss. I think Mark Zuckerberg has had his head in the wrong place and hasn't been skating to where the puck was really going to go. And he kind of just missed on that. And I think Facebook, you're right, that's another company that had an opportunity and missed on it.
Wow, history is written by the victors. So these companies,
is.
Man, like hard times.
So you talked about Copilot, and obviously, AI is being integrated into all of these tools. Where do you feel we're at with that? I mean, and to your point, I mean, you mentioned things like, how do you do attribution now? Like if you're getting AI to write things for you, how do we give credit for that? Do we give credit for that? Are we all prompt engineers now? And as long as we come up with the creative prompt, is the output ours? You know, where do you sit on that?
Yeah, I think right now with the tools that exist today, and I don't know where the transition line will be. But I'm very much in the camp of this is a tool like any other tool. Like I mentioned, like predictive texting on your phone. There's all these other tools that we've been using that are AI adjacent in a lot of ways. And we've never kind of worried about like attribution of those kinds of things. Like if I use predictive texting, do I then say, oh, by the way, I wrote this with predictive texting? No, it's a tool that you have to be able to make your life more productive and more efficient. And I think right now with the tools that exist, I think it's very similar. I think the only issue really ends up being if you pass off an entire large body of content as your own creative work or a complete image that has been untouched by your hands, I think that's a little bit of a gray area. But I still think that these are tools to be wielded and to be more productive and to give yourself a competitive advantage. I think very quickly we're going to see people go, if you're not using one of these tools for your job, you're probably going to be replaced by someone who does. And, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in all this is because I want to continue to remain employed. How about, it's a little thing, but it's super important in the world that we live in and the capitalist society that we're surrounded by. So I'm going to take every advantage that I possibly can with these tools as they're created to make myself as valuable as possible in this world.
Yeah, you mentioned Midjourney. And of course, Adobe also has Firefly, which I believe is their sort of AI tool. Obviously, the whole text to image and text to video is going to be a massive space. I mean, this is a revolution in terms of creating imagery and also motion graphics and things of that nature. It's going to revolutionize the industry in such an incredible way. Midjourney has come a long way, hasn't it? In just even going from, is it 4 to 5 now? Is that where we're at?
That's correct. Yeah, 3 to 4 to 5 were some pretty big leaps. 4 to 5 is almost like a completely different tool. Midjourney 5 is much more focused on realistic imagery generation, so it has a better understanding of things that the previous versions had a hard time with, like fingers and teeth and faces and eyes, and can make some really nice realistic images. Where people still use Midjourney for is for the more fantastical, fictional kinds of things because they're very stylistically different. But I think for me, one of the most interesting things about Adobe Firefly is this assertion that they didn't use any non-licensed imagery to train their model, and therefore any image that comes out of there is really the rights are really and truly yours and not being stolen from the mouth of some poor starving artist somewhere, which a lot of these other tools, even ChatGPT it's been said that it's taken a lot of copywritten works and used that as training information for its AI, for its language model. And I think that whole thing hasn't really been decided by even the court of popular opinion yet, let alone the legal courts. And I think that we're going to see a lot more businesses basically trying to get dollars out of your hands by saying, we're the safe AI option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Midjourney doesn't do text well. So it does, like you mentioned, does fantastical images well, human imagery really, really well, but it does not do text well. Whereas Firefly for Adobe does text brilliantly well. Right.
Yeah, I saw that.
So they've really honed in on what their market really wants, and that tool looks like it's going to be absolutely perfect. And to your point, they do have this ability where you can, I think it's a hashtag that you can use, that when you're creating images using Adobe Firefly, you can tell it to not include the images you're creating into the training of their AI models. So that if let's say you're doing branding work for Coca-Cola, you obviously don't want those images being incorporated into the training of that model, and you can actually give it this specific instruction to say, this is a corporate image, don't use this, and when you're training the AI model. So it gives you no worry that there's going to be exposure and someone else is going to be able to see that image in advance or anything of that nature. So yeah, it sounds like Adobe's very, very much one of those companies that has recognized that this is a shift change, and that they're on it, they're riding this wave, and they're going to have a tool that I think all their creative professionals are going to be very, very happy with, and that's exciting.
But what are your thoughts though on using these tools for productivity? I mean, you asked me, my take on the whole ownership or divulging the fact that you're using these tools. Have you integrated them into your workflow? Do you feel like you need to tell people that you're using them when you're working with clients or even friends or family? We've already seen people use it for responses to emails from your aunt or something like that. What's your take on that?
Oh, that's a good point. I haven't really. I haven't really used it for client work. Directly for client work. So it's not really been an issue yet. I think that's coming. So it's definitely something I need to wrap my head around. So I don't have a great response yet. I have used it for some family stuff. Haven't really necessarily disclosed that like it's from ChatGPT, to be completely honest, because I used some pretty creative prompts in order to get it, and I think that was kind of the thing, right? Like, it wasn't like I just said, oh, like write me a poem about me or about my father or something like that. Like I gave some very creative prompts for something that I wanted to do and felt like, okay, it's kind of my own anyway, and had it tweaked and all this stuff. But you're right. It's a huge gray area. We're walking into a very interesting time in terms of what really is ours and what is not. And are we just going to say that AI? Again, it's if you're the one giving it the prompts and you're the one telling it what to do, and it gives you the output, is it yours? Like it might be. And that's an interesting. So there's a few things I wanted to mention. So one is obviously combining these tools is very powerful. So
yes,
when you can use ChatGPT in combined with, let's say, Midjourney. So I was thinking about so if you're an interior designer and you want to design a 12-year-old girl's bedroom, right? You go to ChatGPT now and you say, I want 5, really wonderful, fantastical ideas, creative ideas for a 12-year-old girl's bedroom using the color palette of purple, yellow, and pink. I want to have a pink sofa and, drapery and all of these things. And it gives you 5, very detailed text ideas. And then you take each of those text ideas and put that into Midjourney, and it gives you that literally full visual design of what ChatGPT gave you. And combining these two tools is immensely powerful and absolutely revolutionizes industries, right? And vastly speeds up the creative process in ways that we are just even barely wrapping our heads around at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, one of the potentials for abuse there, Midjourney actually recently added a way to create multiple variations of prompts by using square brackets to have different words, right? So you could very easily do, instead of girls' bedroom or whatnot, you could do a square bracket girls, young ladies, all these things, and it will add that prompt. And if you add another set of square brackets and say, you do your one color set, another color set, another color set, it will do the combination of all of those different prompts automatically for you and give you all of just a wall of options very, very quickly. So for ideation, we're getting to the point where anything you can think, you can kind of quickly get a bead on the direction that you want to go in, whether it's, I've seen stuff where people are generating different kind of, audio samples to kind of give them inspiration for music that they're working on.
For sure.
I've used ChatGPT to kind of help me when I was stuck in writing a book to deal with a certain scene in a book. And I gave it the data of the characters and what their personalities were and what I wanted to have happen-ish. And it wrote out kind of a rough draft. And I was like, that gives me a starting point. I don't feel so blocked anymore. And then, of course, with Midjourney, we're just seeing huge opportunities there. Architects are starting to look at Midjourney 5 for creating some quick renders for exteriors of different building types. Again, as that first round of client feedback, is this the direction that you're going in? And you
can even give it camera angles and camera lenses
and lighting.
It's mind blowing. Yeah.
Just the lighting effects that you can give it, or even depth of field effects. Imagine that you have a 50 millimeter prime that's an f1.4 set at f1.4, right? It understands some of those context clues and kind of give you this image that's very useful. And it's happening so fast. Like I said, in the last 18 months, we went from Midjourney 3 to Midjourney 5, and that model, Midjourney 3, it really struggled with understanding those context clues and understanding how to weigh the different nouns and verbs and adjectives that you put in your prompts. And it kind of just threw a lot of stuff at a wall, and people created beautiful images, but it was mostly out of random chance and very hard to reproduce and very difficult to figure out how to work with it. And there was these discussions of, the whole idea of prompt engineers. People are going to train to figure out how to interact with these models. And now we have Midjourney 5, and it has much more understanding of natural language, and much more understanding of context clues, and can give you a much better product at the end of it. And so, we talk about prompt engineering, but I don't think that's going to be a thing for much longer with how quickly these tools are really kind of understanding, very basic speech or text or long blocks of information and parsing out what's important and what isn't.
Interesting. So, yeah, when you say not so much prompt engineering anymore, you're saying just you can use your own natural language and you don't have to know necessarily how to prompt per se, as long as you can speak it and in great detail. Yeah.
For example, one of the big things that was happening in Midjourney was everyone was writing 8K, Unreal, high def, 4K. They were adding in all of these buzzwords and filler words to try to get the result that they were looking for. And a lot of the time now, that's no longer needed to kind of get the result that you would expect. So, the learning curve for these tools is shrinking very, very quickly.
Yeah. So it brings up an interesting point, an interesting segue I wanted to get to. So we've talked about text-based AI. We've talked about text to image. We've talked about text to video. One thing we haven't really touched on, which I think is absolutely a massive, massive shift change as well, is text to code. So, right? So I remember 20, 25 years ago, earlier in my career, if you wanted to start a tech company, there would typically be and this is just a very big generalization, but it'd typically be two co-founders. You'd have the creative ideas person, and then you'd have the software engineer that did all the coding, right? And the one thing I've started to wrap my head around is that coding, if you want to build software, typically, if you'd wanted to build software, you'd have to know how to code. And you would basically go through an empirical process where you would go step by step in the coding software, line by line. And eventually, by doing this empirical process, you would eventually get to the end result of what you wanted to build. But now what we're starting to see is we're moving from an empirical process to a declarative process, where now you don't even need the step-by-step anymore. Now you just have to know what the end result is. And as long as you can describe in very great detail what you actually want to build, you can get AI to actually build you the code and build you that end result just by knowing the end result. And so, I'm not at all suggesting that software engineers are going to be dinosaurs and we won't need them. It's just that it's getting to the point where if you're an ideas person and you have a very clear idea of what it is that you want to build, you can co-found with AI to basically code you the software that you want to build. You'd need software engineers to scale. But I'm just saying that it feels like you won't need to know how to code necessarily anymore. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I think what really blew me away was the demo that they did on the multimodal version of ChatGPT 4. When they drew a quick sketch of a web tool and uploaded that sketch and basically said it, output the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for me, and it did, and it looked basically like the sketch, and it did the function the way that the person was looking for. I kind of cried a little bit. I was like, I thought that was still another year plus away. I had seen a lot of tools that kind of assist with coding. There's also a Copilot tool for coding as well. And a new version of it just came out, but I read some documentation recently that a study was done, and even using that older version, they were saying probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30% of developers could be let go as long as the remaining developers were using this tool. I have used ChatGPT to help me code some simple scripts in PHP for some WordPress work. But the key caveat right now is kind of a fun one. Sometimes these tools lie because they're just predictive text algorithms in some ways, right? So it will often reference functions that don't exist and provide me a bunch of code, and I will plug that in, and right away I'll get an error, and I'll bring back the error, and I'll go, oh, sorry about that. Yeah, that's not a real function. Here's the function you need, and you put that in, it goes, that's not a real function. And you come back, and you're like, that wasn't a real function either. Come on, ChatGPT, help me out here. So there is still a large learning curve that it has but it's shrinking so fast. I saw another demo where because the data sets are limited to a very specific period of time, if you had a brand new version of a coding language, ChatGPT or some of these other tools might not know anything about it. But because of the amount of text that you can now put into like GPT-4, which has gone to like 70,000 words or characters or something like that, it's just gigantic these days. I saw people put in like just giant chunks of documentation about the changes to this coding language. The AI model was able to parse out the important bits and then understand the follow-up query and write something that worked. That wasn't part of its training data previously. And I think, those kinds of things are super interesting to me because it'll quickly reduce that learning curve and that ability to kind of get the results you're looking for if you can kind of feed in and do these responsive things. I think the big change with ChatGPT over anything else that I saw was that ability to have memory and that ability to kind of refine what you're looking for and have that dialogue back and forth. Because before that, it was no different than a Google search. And now with the memory system and the ability to kind of build context and build transitions understanding, you're right. You basically have like a junior dev in any and every programming language, in every database system, in every DevOps solution. If it works with a computer and you need some code to manage it or some configuration files, these tools are going to be able to figure those out really quickly. It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes sense in a way, right? Like it's amusing in a way. Now we have computers writing computer code for computers. And I think that's something that we always kind of saw coming because our brains are not built for building out these logic structures. So we've always created these, computer languages with all these different rules to kind of make it easier for us to communicate with computers. And now they're just kind of cutting out the middle person and just talking to themselves in a way. So it was always going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I want to point out that you've now said a few times that things are happening much quicker than you thought. So you're backing yourself into likely buying me a beer at some point. I'm just telling you. So
I mean, but the context for that though is like a lot of the futurists that I used to read, I thought I had to like the mid 2030s before a lot of this technology was going to be as powerful and potent as it is. It's that weird S curve that we were on, and I thought that we were still far away from that exponential growth of the technology. So I thought we were still kind of inching towards that exponential growth, and here we are, we're at the foot of it looking at this giant mountain, and it's happening. Like we're already a few steps up that mountain, and I thought I had a lot more time before we got there.
Yeah. So we're obviously in the process of redefining human productivity in general. Like what is it that actually is going to make us productive in a world where AI is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting? And, when you look at this technology and you talk about jobs that it's going to replace to some degree, typically when we've seen technology arrive, it has absolutely taken jobs, and the internet was a huge disintermediated many industries that it touched. Even the personal computer, changed a lot of industries. And there was a lot of concern that it would sort of do away with so many jobs, but it created more in the end. It was more of a net gain in the end. Is that going to end up being the case with AI, or is this different? Are we going to look back at this and say, yeah, no, this was an entirely different situation, and that it actually is going to end up being a net loss? Like we're actually going to lose jobs, and humans are going to be in some degree of difficulty in terms of how to be productive and how to make wages. And are we really grasping with, I don't know, is this where UBI comes into play because of AI? Where do you sit on that?
I think, as I mentioned before, that's one of the many reasons we're not ready for this. We're in a very complicated and complex, multinational capitalist system. And this is probably the biggest disruptor that we've seen since, the advent of like the assembly line, that kind of machining and creation of products and services and tooling. I think, we're going to kind of touch on this pretty much in a little bit on like every other episode that we have planned so far, because it really does have tendrils everywhere to change everything. And, you talk about the personal computer creating new jobs, but in a lot of ways, our society was already kind of set up for that to be a replacement for multiple different things, right? So, we had typewriters and then we were typing on computers, and we had like calculators and then we had calculators on computers. And so it was really just an upgrade of productivity. And while there were job losses, there was that opportunity for, our minds to continue to power the creations. And if you take us out of that loop, right? If we get to the point where we do have an AGI that doesn't necessarily need our direct input anymore, I think that's when we get to the point of, like, what do we do with our hands kind of thing. Like, it's kind of almost a joke in a way, because, like, what are we going to do, and how are we going to make meaningful progress, and how are we going to feel productive and valuable in a society that has not really been designed for the potential mass layoffs that might exist because of this? Or if we do create new jobs and opportunities, is this going to be like farming, where, basically everyone and their brother used to be a farmer, and now it's like 1 out of every 1,000 people, right? Is that what's going to happen to pretty much every other industry that exists? And then how do we as a society handle that at the population levels that we're at? Like, the whole thing really just breaks my brain and makes me a little bit concerned for the world that we live in. And I think that's a second reason why a lot of people are hoping for a little bit of a delay on this, is because, we're still infighting not just between country to country, but even like state to state or province to province or city to city. And there's so many like little stupid human conflicts that we have that just don't work in a world where something like UBI has to exist. And
Right.
That makes me super nervous.
Yeah, and COVID, for everything that it sort of did, the way I always viewed COVID and sort of the lasting impacts of it is that COVID really didn't change anything, but it accelerated all the trends that were already starting to happen. It just turbocharged everything. Like, it's not that remote learning didn't exist before COVID. It just massively accelerated that whole trend. Video conferencing, same thing. Like, all of the trends that were like sort of just starting, COVID just like fast tracked it all. And so I saw a chart the other day of the number of employees it takes for an S&P 500 company to generate $1 million in revenue. And the curve is just like a downward curve. And it's been a downward curve for like the last 50 odd years. And so the trend is already there. The trend was already there that we were needing less and less humans to generate $1 million in revenue at the S&P 500 level at the corporate level. AI is now going to probably fast track that trend like exponentially, right? So it's not that this wasn't already happening, automation wasn't already happening, but now AI just takes that ball and runs it right down the field and completely changes the whole trajectory of it. So I think I think it opens up a real question as to whether or not this is the first technology that won't necessarily be a net gain when it comes to human productivity, jobs, value. It'll create value for sure, but is it going to create value equitably? I'm not so sure about that either. But
so how do you handle that? Like, when you're projecting your own life ahead for the next, as you said, like 2 years until AGI comes out, how do you kind of maintain the quality of life that you're looking for in the place that you live? How do you, give value in a way that can compete with some young upstarts or whatever that are using these tools and really kind of have that digital native understanding of how these all work and how they can combine them and how they can kind of produce content and imagery and video and audio faster and faster and faster? How do you kind of keep up with that, and how do you deal with that?
I think much in the same way that you are, Malcolm. I think it's you've got to push and pull and use every single day. There's just no burying your head in the sand. I think you have to look for ways to use this technology and maximize it. And the more that you can use it and get familiar with it, the better that you're going to be. And, it's the same thing with the internet in some ways.
Yeah.
If you were slow to adopt the internet, you were way behind. Those that were early with it and learned how to use it to their advantage benefited from it. I think AI is obviously, I think the stakes are way higher, but I think, you want to be using this stuff and you want to be staying on top of where this is going. I don't have an exact answer to say like, this is how I'm going to continue to use it, and this is how I'm going to stay on top of it all. But at the same time, immersing yourself in it as much as you possibly can, making it your business to stay on top of how this is changing, how this is evolving, and how you can incorporate it in your day-to-day work life and in your personal life, I think is going to be critical. It's going to be critical for those that really want to stay productive and stay and continue to add value. You got to be able to wield this technology.
Do you find yourself advocating to your family for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You?
Same. Yeah. Anyone that'll listen to me, unfortunately, I think they're a little bit sick of it already. I think a lot of them are wanting to kind of plug their ears and go, no, it's not happening. It's not happening, because it can seem confusing or overwhelming or difficult. But honestly, once I get them to try something out, like once I show them and get them to like actually input their own prompt into Midjourney or ChatGPT,
there's an aha moment.
Yeah, they get hooked very, very quickly, and I'm very happy with that, because it means the barrier to entry is very low, which is super important for this kind of technology. But it also means that, you know, I am hopefully empowering them to deal with this transition that's going to happen in our world, so that they can, if not necessarily, you know, jump both feet in, at least be ready for that transition as it's happening, rather than just assuming that, you know, this is a fad, like, you know, like VR kind of stuff that we mentioned before, right? Or AR, or those kinds of technologies that I think everyone thought we would be walking around with augmented reality glasses by now. And I don't know anyone that does in my circles, and I'm in a pretty tech head circle. So I think a lot of people are hoping that this technology will do that too, and it doesn't appear to be. I mean, the number of new companies that are being created that are using these, even just OpenAI's API, is massive. We're talking about hundreds of new companies finding funding or bootstrapping to use this technology to answer some specific question or set of questions and make their mark and make their money. And it's just super fast. I think that's one of the issues, is it can kind of feel overwhelming that there's so many things happening with this so fast. But you got to be there to figure it out, because it's not going to slow down for anyone.
No, and you know, to your point, I don't want to get into the weeds on this, because we have a whole other episode to talk about AI in education. But you know, I have university age kids, young man, but you know, they get it, they understand, but at the same time, the legacy education system is like completely not prepared to handle this.
They must look at you and go, "Do we pivot, Dad? Like, what do we do about this?"
I mean, just in schools in general, they're having such a difficult time. Teachers are having such a difficult time dealing with this tool. And should we let students use it? Should we try and ban it? There are schools out there they're trying to ban it,
because you're never going to have a calculator at your hands for the rest of your life.
Yeah, no. So and what are we educating for? How are we educating people today for a world with AI? You know, is essay writing still important when you can get AI to write? I mean, there's all kinds of issues, and you know, it's the legacy education system is a bit like the Titanic, and AI is like the iceberg. You know, you're cranking the wheel. You know that something massive is there. It's not able to turn in time. You know, it's hitting it straight on, and it's definitely creating all kinds of issues. But I look forward to getting into that when we do our education episode, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues with this technology right now, one of the difficult things that I've had in terms of productivity in general with this technology is the older generation. So like my parents, my aunts and uncles, they look at this technology and they're bewildered by it. They don't understand it. They don't trust it. They don't know how to learn to trust it. And they're seeing all the news that's talking about how it's being used to like fake pictures of this person and that person, or to like write these horrible articles, or like create this fake audio, and they just kind of swear off it completely. They throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And you know, I'd be super interested in your opinion on how do we continue to make this technology seem approachable for, honestly, the people that it could benefit the most, right? You're talking about people who are, you know, not as energetic necessarily, or not, you know, they have all of this knowledge that they've acquired over the years of their life. And if they could figure out how to interact with these tools and convert that knowledge into valuable output, I mean, their personal productivity or their work productivity could go through the roof. So
Yeah.
how do we get them there?
Well, I think the way I look at that is I see that as a UI UX issue. Like at the end of the day, that'll work itself out. You know, that's a technology problem, and I think that there'll be lots of financial corporate incentive to come up with ways to bring in an older generation and make it friendly and make it more usable or purpose built in ways that would cater to that generation. But there's no question as we have a new layer of technology, it does create even more of a buffer. Like obviously, you know, the millennials are in this wonderful time in their life where they're really able to grasp this. They grew up with the internet, they grew up with computers, so they're headed into their prime, you know, years of productivity. So like it's really built for them. And obviously, if you're older and you know you still had a lot of your life without the internet, and this is now another buffer. This is now where, yeah, you're going to have to reach deep now, and you're really going to have to, you know, not ignore this. But I do think that it's a UI UX issue, and I think that'll get figured out, and it'll become more approachable for those that might view this as still a little bit too tech for them.
Even outside of that, though, how do you manage a team using this technology? Like, how do you stay on top of, you know, I don't know about you, but when I've run teams before, I've had like these all-star players who it ended up becoming like a big part of my job to kind of keep their inbox full of work, right? Because they were just that good. And now you add these tools into play that can speed them up to almost 50% faster or even 100% faster than they were before. Like if you're a senior manager leading a team of devs or leading a team of database people or even leading a creative team, how do you kind of, one, keep up with that, mentor them? You know, like there's all these things that, you know, we have this traditional business model of productivity and understanding and workflow, and it doesn't necessarily fit within this new paradigm shift that we're entering.
I think that is something that is still very much in the figuring out stage, and I don't think we've figured out how to calibrate for that right now. And I think that's something that's over time that's going to have to get that's going to have to get refined, and I don't think we're anywhere remotely close to that yet.
Can you imagine your bonus structure being based on how good you are with AI tools or not?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole other realm, no question about it. Well, listen, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed. I think we've touched on a lot of things with respect to AI and productivity, and I know this probably won't be the only episode that we do on productivity because things are moving so quickly, and it seems like every day, you know, there are new launches, there are new tools being built, and you know, you mentioned the API for ChatGPT, and we'll kind of finish this off because I think we've touched on enough for right now. But I do want to say that one thing I now recognize ChatGPT as is it's kind of an app store. It's going to be like an app store. It's an ecosystem, and through the API, you're going to have a lot of third-party developers developing plugins that are going to add so much functionality to ChatGPT. So on the one hand, I said like it's kind of floating, it's quite general, it's jack of all trades, master of nothing. But through its API and through the apps, the plugins that are going to be built on top of this, it's going to be very purpose built. It's going to have all kinds of narrow AI purposes, and that is absolutely fascinating. I mean, this is a crazy company, OpenAI. It's a next $1 trillion company, and it is definitely going to be a generational company. Which ChatGPT is not just like this one thing that they built and it's going to get forgotten, replaced. This is really like the app store for AI essentially, and it's going to be a massive ecosystem. And I'm super excited to see where this goes, and I'm super excited to see how AI will continue to make us more productive, make us more efficient, and continue to add value to all of our lives, both work and personal.
Me too, man. I'm tentative, but I'm excited, and I look forward to exploring these topics more with you.
We are going to unpack all kinds of AI episodes and topics. So this is the end of this particular episode. Thank you for joining us. If you've made it this far, we really appreciate it. Please subscribe. Every subscriber matters to us, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us for AI Unpacked. Please stay tuned for our next episode.